3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files. Last time, we followed how Epstein captured the political system of the U.S. Virgin Islands through donations and economic dependency. Today, we are tracing the documented connections between Epstein, the Maxwell family, and Israeli intelligence, what the records show, and where the evidence stops. As always, every document and source we reference is available at epsteinfiles.fm. So, in November 1991, Robert Maxwell Ghislaine's father fell from his yacht and was found dead in the Atlantic. Israel gave him a state funeral on the Mount of Olives. Prime Minister Shamir said Maxwell had done more for Israel than can today be said, and at least 6 heads of Israeli intelligence attended. That is not a normal send-off for a newspaper publisher.
No, it's really not. That's a send-off reserved for a state asset, not a civilian.
And we need to be very precise here about what happened on the Mount of Olives. This wasn't just a group of friends or politicians.
Not at all. The attendance list, when you audit it, it's essentially a roster of the entire Israeli security establishment from that period.
You have Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, that's Shamir.
Right, and President Chaim Herzog. But the key detail, the one that tells the real story, is the intelligence presence.
The 6 serving and former heads?
Yes. The directors of Mossad, Mossad, and Shin Bet. I mean, these are individuals who, by definition, operate in the shadows.
They don't do public appearances unless it's absolutely necessary.
Exactly. They don't attend the funerals of foreign media moguls. There's no reason for it unless there is a profound operational debt that needs to be acknowledged.
And Shamir's eulogy seems to acknowledge that debt directly. That phrase you mentioned. He has done more for Israel than can today be said.
That phrase is everything. It's the key. Than can today be said.
It's basically saying the work was classified.
It's the definition of it. It implies that Maxwell's contribution wasn't about charity, it wasn't philanthropy, it was operational.
Right, if he'd just built a few libraries or donated money, Shamir would have just said that.
Of course. He would have listed the public works, but he didn't. He alluded to Secret Service. So to really understand the network that Ghislaine, Maxwell, Ghislaine inherited, and then the network Jeffrey Epstein built on top of that, you have to start here. You have to audit what that service was.
Which brings us to the PROMIS software scandal. The paper trail here it's pretty extensive. It's in FBI counterintelligence files. And there's detailed reporting from outlets like Mint Press News and the Washington Post.
PROMIS. PROMIS. It's an acronym.
Prosecutors Management Information System.
That's it. So back in the 1980s, there was a piece of software developed by a small company called Inslaw. On the surface, it's just, case management software.
For tracking legal files, court dates, names, that kind of thing.
Yes, but the architecture was unique for the time. Its real power was its ability to integrate separate, disparate databases.
So it could connect the dots.
It could track people and money across totally different systems.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful tool.
And the central allegation, which is supported by sworn affidavits, is that this hugely powerful tool was stolen and then modified.
That's correct. The software was appropriated from Inslaw. Now, the intelligence reporting, and this relies heavily on testimony from former intelligence officials, indicates that Israeli intelligence brought in an expert to modify the code.
A man named Rafi Eitan.
Yes, a legendary figure in Israeli intelligence. And his job was to insert what they called a trapdoor, a back door into the software.
Meaning if another government bought and installed this software to manage their own secrets,
the people who built the trapdoor could see everything.
It's a Trojan horse.
A digital Trojan horse. And Robert Maxwell was the distribution mechanism for it.
He was the salesman.
He was the primary salesman. The FBI files, along with investigative reporting from people like Seymour Hersh, they document this very clearly. Maxwell used his business empire as a front to sell this compromised technology.
To whom?
To foreign intelligence agencies, to military dictatorships in Latin America. He even sold it to countries in the Soviet bloc.
So he's selling them a tool to organize their state secrets and surveil their own people, while simultaneously giving Mossad a direct window into all of their most sensitive operations.
And that is precisely the operational model. And it didn't go completely unnoticed at the time.
The British government suspected something.
Yes, we have internal memos from the British Foreign Office from that period. They couldn't prove it publicly, but they suspected Maxwell was, and this is a direct quote, a secret agent of a foreign government.
So in their internal diplomatic cables, they were treating him as a vector for Israeli intelligence.
So they were. So you have the father, a meaty tycoon, running this massive business empire that's also serving as a front for state-level espionage, distributing surveillance tech. Then, November 1991, he dies. The empire implodes under a mountain of debt and pension fraud.
And Ghislaine immediately moves to New York.
Almost instantly. And she connects with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the public narrative for years was just that she was a down-on-her-luck socialite in exile.
Fleeing the scandal in London.
Right. But if you look at the physical evidence, at what was found in Epstein's possession years and years later, the relationship looks very different.
You're talking about Robert Maxwell's personal files, the archives.
Yes. Police records and later estate documents, they both confirm that as late as 2004, Jeffrey Epstein was physically storing Robert Maxwell's personal files at his residence in Palm Beach.
This detail is critical. It's not just that he was housing Ghislaine. He was physically warehousing the personal papers, the archives, of a man who was buried with state honors by Israeli intelligence.
And you have to ask the question, why? Why would a financier from Ohio, a former math teacher, need the personal archives of a deceased British media mogul and spy?
Those files would contain everything.
Presumably.
Yeah.
The contact lists, the operational notes, perhaps even the leverage materials gathered over Maxwell's entire career. It strongly suggests a handover.
That Ghislaine didn't just bring her name and her social connections to the partnership with Epstein.
She brought the family business, the infrastructure, the operational model.
And when you look at that model, the parallels are stark. The business model of the father's surveillance, financial complexity, high-level access, potential entrapment, it mirrors the exact business model that Epstein adopted.
The continuity is the evidence itself. Maxwell bugged offices, hotel rooms. Epstein put cameras in bedrooms and bathrooms. Maxwell compromised powerful figures for leverage. Epstein did the same. The methodology is consistent. Only the management changed.
Which leads us to the on-camera testimony of Ari Ben-Menashe. Ari Ben-Menashe, he's given several interviews, notably to the Outlet narrative, where he claims he saw this connection firsthand.
Ben-Menashe is a figure that requires a great deal of forensic caution.
Let's start with the facts we can verify.
Okay, the facts are these. He is a confirmed former Israeli military intelligence officer. That's not in dispute. He worked in the External Relations Department of the Military Intelligence Directorate. That is verified.
But his specific claims about Epstein are where the paper trail runs cold.
Correct. So Ben-Menashe alleges that he personally met Jeffrey Epstein way back in the 1980s, and the meeting place was Robert Maxwell's office.
And that Maxwell introduced Epstein to the operation.
That's the specific charge. He claims that Epstein and Ghislaine were recruited to run a sexual blackmail operation targeting American politicians, and that this was done on behalf of Israeli military intelligence.
Oh, a state-sponsored honey trap, essentially.
Yes. The goal being the entrapment of powerful figures to ensure political leverage for a foreign state. However, we have to audit the credibility of the source himself.
Right. Time magazine, for instance, once characterized Ben-Menashe as a spinner of tangled yarns.
And that's the problem. While his background in intelligence is absolutely real, he does have a track record of making these very expansive claims that can't be independently corroborated with a paper trail.
So we have a witness with the right security clearance, the right background, alleging a specific meeting, a specific recruitment, but we don't have a flight log placing Epstein there, or a photograph, or even a calendar entry.
Exactly. It remains a single-source allegation from let's say, a controversial figure. The narrative he presents aligns perfectly with the PROMIS methodology, using a commercial front to gather compromising material. But without corroborating documents, it has to stay in the category of allegation.
It's not proven fact. It provides a framework for a theory, but it's not a conviction.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's move to the claim that has probably done more than any other to fuel this entire angle of the story, the Alexander Acosta quote.
He belonged to intelligence.
Yes, that one phrase.
That phrase has really distorted the public understanding of the case because it's so often treated as some kind of official admission of fact. We have to trace where it actually came from.
Its provenance.
It originated in a report by the journalist Vicky Ward for the Daily Beast. She reported that Alexander Acosta, who was the U.S. attorney who signed that now infamous non-prosecution agreement in 2008.
The sweetheart deal.
Right. That he told the Trump transition team that he'd been told to back off the case because Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence.
But when you try to find the primary source for that quote, the person who actually heard Acosta say it, it gets murky.
It completely dissolves. Skeptic magazine did a very detailed breakdown of this. The, quote, the entire story hinges on a single anonymous source.
Described only as a former senior White House official.
So it's hearsay. It's an unattributed quote from an anonymous source. And more importantly, Acosta himself was asked about this directly, under oath.
By the Department of Justice's own internal affairs.
Yes, the DOJ's Office of Professional Responsibility, the OPR. They did a comprehensive review of that 2008 plea deal. And they asked Acosta, point blank, were you ever told that Epstein was an intelligence asset?
And he denied it.
He denied it under oath.
The final OPR report was pretty definitive on this point, wasn't it?
It was. The findings stated there was, quote, no evidence that Epstein was an intelligence asset, and no evidence that anyone involved in the original investigation believed he was one.
So the official record is a denial.
A skeptic could argue, well, of course he would deny it to protect himself or the agency. But legally speaking, the official record is a firm denial under oath.
However, that doesn't mean the idea of Epstein as an asset wasn't floating around in the system. The FBI files show that it was, which brings us to the FD 1023 report.
Right. File EFT 0000090314. So an FD 1023, just for clarity, is the form the FBI uses to record information that's been provided by a confidential human source.
It's raw intelligence, an unverified tip.
Exactly. It's not a verified fact. It's just a record that a source said something. And in this document, a source claims Epstein was trained as a spy under Ehud Barak. Ehud Barak.
But we now know who that source was.
We do. Alan Dershowitz eventually identified the source as a man named Charles Johnson, who is a figure with, let's say, significant credibility issues. He's been described as a fraudster and a fabricator.
So from a forensic standpoint, what does the existence of this FD 123 actually prove?
It proves that an allegation was made. It proves the FBI logged a rumor. That's it. It does not prove the rumor is true.
So it shows the intelligence community was receiving reports that linked Epstein to Israeli intelligence.
But receiving a report and validating a report are two completely different things. So the verbal evidence, the quotes, they're all very shaky. You have a denied quote from Acosta and a report from a dubious source.
But the financial records? That's where the connection becomes much harder to dismiss, which means we have to talk about Ehud Barak and the money.
This is, I would argue, the strongest block of evidence we have. Because Ehud Barak is not some fringe figure. He is a former prime minister of Israel. He was the former chief of the general staff of the military, the former head of military intelligence.
A central figure in the Israeli establishment.
Absolutely. And his relationship with Epstein wasn't just social. It wasn't just a few visits. It was structural, it was financial, and it was centered on surveillance technology.
And the company at the heart of this is called Carbyne, Carbyne. It was formerly called Reporty.
Carbyne is an Israeli tech firm. It specializes in advanced emergency response systems. So the technology allows a 911 dispatcher to remotely access the camera and the microphone of a caller's smartphone.
Which is an incredibly powerful tool for public safety.
And an incredibly powerful tool for surveillance. It's both. And Ehud Barak served as the chairman of this company.
And Jeffrey Epstein was the one who funded it.
The structure of the investment is very specific. To put money into Carbyne, Barak formed a limited partnership. It was called SUM-EB 2015.
And the financial records show where the money came from.
They do. The records show that the major limited partner, the entity that was actually injecting the cash into this partnership, was a company called Southern Trust Company.
Which is one of Jeffrey Epstein's main corporate entities in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Correct. So you have Epstein acting as the financial engine behind the former prime minister's investment into a cutting-edge surveillance tech company. But the documents show there's another, even more complex layer to this.
This is Project Graphen.
Yes. A 2016 Carbyne Company report documents the creation of a separate corporate entity called Graphen, Graphen.
And what was Graphen's purpose?
The report is very explicit about it. It's not hidden. Graphen was established for the specific purpose of concealing the Israeli ownership of Carbyne's technology.
Why would they need to do that?
The stated goal was to make it easier to sell the surveillance tech to foreign governments, specifically to Arab nations, where purchasing technology directly from a known Israeli firm would be politically impossible or illegal.
This sounds almost identical to the PROMIS scandal.
The parallel is stunning. In the 1980s, Robert Maxwell sells the PROMIS software to the Soviet bloc and to Arab nations by hiding the Israeli-made backdoor. Fast forward to 2015, Jeffrey Epstein is funding Carbyne. which uses a front company called Graphen to hide its Israeli ownership so it can sell surveillance technology to Arab nations.
It's the same operational model. Use a commercial front to embed Israeli-aligned technology into the core infrastructure of other states.
It is exactly the same playbook. And the Gmail archive, that trove of Epstein's leaked emails, it shows that his role wasn't passive. He was an active participant.
He wasn't just a silent partner with a checkbook.
No, he was a signatory on documents. And this financial pipeline didn't stop with Carbyne. It also extended to the Wexner Foundation.
Right. We found records of a huge transfer from the Wexner Foundation directly to Ehud Barak.
A transfer of $2.3 million.
Yeah, and the official reason, the line item on the transfer, was for research.
$2.3 million for research.
Yeah.
But the critical piece of information is who authorized it. Who signed the forms?
Jeffrey Epstein.
Jeffrey Epstein personally signed the transfer forms.
Which raises a fundamental question. Why is a private money manager from Ohio, a convicted sex offender, the signatory authority on a multi-million-dollar transfer from an American retail billionaire, Les Wexner, to a former Israeli prime minister?
It demonstrates that Epstein held the keys to this entire financial relationship. He was the gatekeeper. He was the architect. You don't give signatory power over millions of dollars to a casual acquaintance or a hanger-on. You give it to the person running the deal.
And beyond the financial ties, there was the physical proximity. The Gmail schedules show that Barak was a very frequent visitor to Epstein's townhouse on East 71st Street.
He was. And also to the building at 301 East 66th Street.
This is the apartment building that was effectively controlled by Epstein, where he housed many of the young women he was trafficking.
And the records show that Ehud Barak and his wife maintained an apartment in that very same building.
Along with his chief of staff, Yoni Karen.
Yoni Karen, who is himself a former intelligence officer. So in the same building where victims were being held and trafficked, you have the former Prime Minister of Israel and his intelligence chief in residence. Neighbors at the time reported seeing security details, flashy cars, official vehicles. It confirms the high-level nature of these visits.
So it establishes this physical hub in New York where the lines between Epstein's criminal operation and the Israeli security establishment were, for all practical purposes, non-existent.
They were completely blurred. Which brings us to the surveillance infrastructure itself. Because the entire honey trap theory relies on the premise that Epstein was recording his powerful guests. And we have concrete evidence that he was.
We do. We have the testimony of Maria Farmer. She was one of the first women to report Epstein to the FBI.
And she was an artist. She had a very strong visual memory. She provided incredibly detailed testimony about this. She described finding pinhole cameras hidden in the bathrooms, in the bedrooms, all over Epstein's properties. She said she could see the eyes monitoring private moments.
And this wasn't just testimony. The police found physical evidence.
Yes. During the 2005 police raid on Epstein's home in Palm Beach, they seized a clock camera. This was verified by Channel 4 News. It was a pinhole spy camera concealed inside the face of a clock that was positioned on Epstein's desk.
And the police logs confirmed that there was footage on the tapes they seized?
The logs confirmed tapes existed. And Channel 4 reported that the footage they saw showed Epstein with young women. The big question, the missing link, is whether footage exists of the powerful men in Epstein's orbit. The FBI has never released a full inventory of the media they seized in that raid.
But the purpose of having such a system is clear. It's not just for one thing.
No, it's dual purpose. It's about compliance and insurance. You record the victims to control them. You record the clients to own them.
In intelligence terms, it's compromat.
It is the textbook definition of compromat. If you have video evidence of a world leader, a CEO, a top scientist committing a crime, you have leverage. You can influence their decisions.
And yet, despite all of this, we have a categorical denial from the former head of Mossad, Yossi Cohen, in 2026.
Yes, he stated that Epstein had, quote, absolutely nothing to do with Mossad. He said he was not an agent, not an operative. That is the official line from Israel.
So how do we reconcile absolutely nothing with the documented financial partnerships with former prime minister, with the housing of intelligence chiefs in his building?
You reconcile it by looking very carefully at the definitions. Epstein was likely not a card-carrying Mossad officer. He almost certainly wasn't on the official government payroll.
So not an agent in that formal sense.
Right. But in the world of intelligence, there's a vast gray area between officer and civilian. You have assets. You have Sayanim, which are volunteer helpers. You have useful idiots. If Epstein was running a private blackmail operation that happened to provide data that was useful to the state, And if that state's former leaders did business with him, he can be a useful asset without being a formal agent.
So the denial addresses the formal employment status, but not the operational utility.
Exactly. It's a very carefully worded denial. And the Glomar response from the U.S. government suggests they're also navigating the same gray area.
This brings us to the larger geopolitical ambitions. There's a 2018 email in the Gmail archive from Ehud Barak to Epstein. The text is all lowercase, it's very casual, but the content is anything but.
It's very significant. Barak writes to Epstein, "You should make clear that I don't work for Mossad."
Why does a former prime minister and war hero need to tell a convicted sex offender to clarify to people that he doesn't work for Mossad?
It implies that the accusation was so prevalent within their shared circle that Barak felt the need to create a written record of a denial. It's an email that reads like a cover your tracks document. The very need for the denial confirms the association was being actively discussed.
And then there's the Libya email from 2011. This document, which was released by Al Jazeera, it changes the entire scale of how Epstein was being viewed by people in this world.
The context is crucial. This is right after the fall of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. There's a total power vacuum, and billions upon billions of dollars in sovereign wealth are frozen or have gone missing.
And Epstein receives an email.
He receives an email that outlines a plan to recover $80 billion in frozen Libyan state assets.
$80 billion.
And the email explicitly states that the team willing to assist in this massive recovery operation includes former members of MI6 and Mossad.
So this places Epstein in an entirely different category. He's not just a money manager or a socialite. He is being pitched on a state-level asset recovery operation that involves personnel from the world's top intelligence agencies.
Correct. You don't pitch that kind of operation, a Libya operation involving MI6 and Mossad, to a simple financier. You pitch it to someone who is viewed as a geopolitical fixer, someone who can operate in those gray spaces. It shows that the intelligence community, or at least the private contractors coming out of it, saw Epstein as a peer, or at least as a gateway to that level of operation.
And Epstein's own legal team seemed to treat this intelligence connection as a serious possibility they needed to defend against.
Yes, this is another key piece of evidence. We found Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, requests that were filed by Epstein's lawyer, Darren Indike.
He filed them with the CIA and the NSA.
He did. He asked them for any and all records they held pertaining to Jeffrey Epstein.
And in response, he got the classic Glomar.
He got the Glomar response. We can neither confirm nor deny the existence or non-existence of records. Now, that's a standard response for national security matters, but the action of filing the request is what's so revealing.
It shows that Epstein's own lawyers were probing the U.S. intelligence agencies to see what they had on him. They were treating the intelligence angle not as a wild conspiracy theory, but as a concrete legal reality that they needed to investigate.
Either they didn't know the answer and were trying to find out, or they knew and were trying to find out what the government knew. Either way, they took it seriously.
Okay. So we've audited the records, we've separated the documented facts from the rumors and the single source allegations. Let's try to synthesize this. What is the documented reality here?
I think it's helpful to put it into two columns. In the hard column, the column of documented facts, you have this. 1, Robert Maxwell was a state asset for Israel, buried with full honors, and Jeffrey Epstein took physical possession of his personal files. That's a fact. 2, Epstein was the key financier for Ehud Barak's surveillance technology ventures, which used shell companies like Graphen to specifically mask Israeli ownership for sales to Arab states. That is documented in company reports.
But fact.
3, Epstein installed sophisticated surveillance hardware in his properties, hardware that is consistent with a blackmail or entrapment operation. Police seized it. That's a fact. And 4, high-level Israeli intelligence figures and political leaders like Barak frequented and even lived in Epstein's properties. That is a fact.
Okay, that's the hard column. What's in the soft column, the area of speculation?
The soft column is where we lack the smoking gun of formal recruitment. We do not have a recruitment file with Epstein's name on it. We don't have a payment stub from an intelligence agency. We do not have a verified video of Epstein handing compromising tapes to a handler.
We have the architecture of an intelligence operation, but not the HR paperwork.
That's a good way to put it. What the documents show is a man who is deeply, deeply embedded in the architecture of state security. He used the methods of espionage. He financed the technology of espionage. And he housed the personnel of espionage.
And for the victims, the distinction between whether he was formally employed by a state or simply allowed to operate because he was useful, That may be a distinction without a difference.
I think that's right. If you are running a massive blackmail ring that happens to target the enemies or political targets of a particular state, and that state protects you or does business with you, then you are part of the apparatus, whether you have a badge or not. The useful idiot theory suggests he thought he was a player, but was being used. The asset theory suggests he was a willing participant. The documents we have support either of those scenarios. But they completely rule out the idea that he was operating in a vacuum. He was not alone.
The Glomer response from the CIA and NSA stands. The U.S. government will not confirm if they hold intelligence files on Jeffrey Epstein. The files we do have show a man deeply embedded in the architecture of state security, financing the technology used by spies, and housing the secrets of those who came before him. Next time, Interpol failures.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name, and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.